Welcome to the program. I'm Christiane Amanpour in London. Big news from Kentucky tonight. A grand jury indicted one Louisville officer involved in the shooting death of Breonna Taylor. Brett Hankinson was charged with 3 counts of wanton endangerment in the first degree. The 2 other officers who were there are not facing charges. You'll remember Breonna Taylor, a 26-year-old African-American woman, was shot by police in March when they entered her apartment with a no-knock warrant. Her boyfriend says he did not know they were cops and shot first. The cops, 2 of them, then shot back, killing Taylor. The death of Breonna Taylor rocked a country and has led to many protests. Joining us now for more on this is the Reverend Barber, civil rights activist and co-chair of the Poor People's Campaign, and incredibly vocal, obviously, in the current national reckoning for racial justice. Barber, it's really important that we talk to you because you heard the Kentucky Attorney General appeal to everybody, activists, religious, civilians, law enforcement, to be responsible at this moment. I wonder what you made of the decision by the grand jury, and what we said actually may not be quite correct. The Kentucky Attorney General said it is not clear at this time which of any of the bullets that were fired actually was the fatal one. So what do you make of the indictment on 3 counts of wanton endangerment in the first degree?
Well, first of all, I want to remind folk that this is McConnell's former lawyer. And he sounded at the end like an old white supremacist in the South that basically blamed the protest on outsiders. And then he conflated the protest with violence when the only violence has really been done that's taken life and destroyed life in Kentucky has been that of the officers. He didn't make any commitment that he would stand behind the call for a full federal investigation. This indictment erases the very name of Breonna Taylor. Didn't even mention. It's more about endangerment to the neighbors and wanton actions. And for him to say that the truth has been found, I'm from the South, and we know a lot of times when grand juries come back, citizens that the truth has not been found. In fact, the grand jury doesn't find the truth. A grand jury simply says whether or not there needs to be a trial to find the truth. He's saying that there doesn't even need to be a trial to find the truth. And when you say he doesn't know which bullet, he knows a bullet from all of those that were shot. We also know that this no-knock warrant is wrong in the first place. And so the first thing I want to say is several other things, but I want to say this very clearly, because we're going to deal with racism. Just because the Attorney General is black does not mean he gets a pass on criticism. And he, too, is an enabler of racism if he allows these officers not to be tried in the courts, the trial. Civil lawsuits that an insurance company is paying don't become an answer to murder by officers of the state. There needs to be a trial. And that's why ultimately we need a federal law that holds police officers accountable for when they kill innocent, unarmed black people, and they can be tried for murder at the federal level. But to not even have a trial, every American, regardless of race, creed, or color, should be really, really, really concerned about that. To have all of this happen and not even have a trial, and then to erase the person that was killed out of the final decision is horrific. And protesters nonviolently should be protesting, but protesters have been protesting nonviolently. The violence here has been perpetrated by a no-knock warrant in all of this shooting that already a civil suit said was wrongful death. And even today's one indictment says there was wantonness that shouldn't have been. So there's no reason there shouldn't be an indictment and the truth be sought in court.
Reverend Barber, I was under the impression that there would be a trial under this one indictment. But can I ask you...
There will be a trial on that one indictment, yes, but not issues, murder, and the other issues. Yeah.
Right. So I want to read a short statement from Ben Crump, who's the attorney for the family of Breonna Taylor. He said of this decision, this is, quote, not what we fully wanted, but brings us closer to justice.
Yeah.
If the family's attorney is saying that, how should people like yourself and people on the street react now?
Just what I just said. It's not what we wanted. It is an indictment. We still now have the federal case. We don't know if we can trust Barr on this, but we should continue to push. That's what we always do in the movement. Mm-hmm. I've been a part of cases where people have been in jail, wrongfully in jail, black men, for 20 and 40 years for crimes they didn't do. And we kept pushing until we got them out. We need to keep pushing here until justice is found. This decision of an attorney general does not in any way suggest that the movement shouldn't keep pushing. Lawyers couldn't keep pushing. We should keep calling for what we know should happen, and that is a full trial on these matters. Listen, police used a battering ram and a no-knock warrant, which should be illegal, to break into Breonna Taylor's home and shoot her 5 times. Yes, there was a shot back, but the no-knock warrant is problematic in the first place. And anything less than indictments for a full extent of the officer's actions ultimately cannot stand. That's why Crump is exactly right. It's a step, an indictment, but it's not what we want. And we have to continue to work for full justice in this society. They endangered the neighbors, as this indictment says, but Breonna Taylor got a casket, and not a single officer is charged for that and tried in court. Notice what the movement is even saying. We're not even saying right now they should be found guilty. We're saying there should at least be a trial in court. So I agree with my dear friend Ben Crump. This is not what we wanted. It's a step. But justice is a journey. Justice is a complete trip. So we have, all along the history of civil rights, we have to take steps and keep on stepping. Mm-hmm. We have to take something and we have to keep on pushing.
Mm-hmm. Reverend Barber, you know, for many of us looking from the outside, the United States is a very complicated place on many, many levels, especially on perhaps law and order and the criminal justice system. You heard the Attorney General there saying that, yes, people outside may not understand this, but our law here in Kentucky could not find any reason to indict or bring charges against the 2 who, as you say, opened the door, no-knock warrant, battering ram. He laid out the case whereby Breonna Taylor's boyfriend fired the first shot, he says, because he thought he didn't know they were cops, and then they fired back. And he said, in that regard, those 2, not Hankinson, but those 2, therefore, under Kentucky law, there's nothing Kentucky law can do about it.
Yeah. Well, that's a politician talking. Let me just say a couple of things. First of all, we haven't had a trial, so we don't even know if the no-knock warrant was justified. We don't know what went into it. That's what a trial would bring out. We don't know if race was a part of why they went there in the first place. Also, that's why we're pushing for federal law. And doesn't it say something that states can have various laws that can allow people to not even be tried for cases like this? This comes out of the old South. Remember, the South a lot of times has had laws that eventually had to be challenged at the federal level and had to be turned around, because too often these states do pass laws like no-knock warrant. They do pass laws that protect officers from indictment when they shouldn't be protected from indictment. That's why we need not just a reckoning around racism, but a reconstruction, an examination of these laws. This woman is dead. She got a casket, and no one is even being tried in court. She was unarmed. She was asleep. She was in her own home. This whole case is problematic. But when you shut it down and you don't even allow cross-examination, that grand jury doesn't do cross-examination like that. Mm-hmm. You don't do cross-examination. You don't bring it into court. Then we don't know all of the dynamics of the case. So this is a step, but it's not the final step. And I suspect we'll be working on this case for a long time to come. And more is going to eventually come out, I would suspect, as it has done in other situations. But just to erase her and to say it's over, the insurance company pay for wrongful death, the cops continue to go on, activists and all need to challenge that. And it's not activists outside of Kentucky. It's people right there in Kentucky and others joining with them from Kentucky saying there's something wrong with the laws when you can't even have a basic indictment and a trial. I want to emphasize that, Sister Anna, a trial.
Yes. Again, to be clear to the viewers, there presumably will be at least one trial, but you're saying there should be for all of them. Now, let me ask you this.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this.
And a trial about her death. not
Yes.
just about endangering people. A woman got a casket.
One of those bullets of his apparently went into her body, according to the Attorney General. So presumably that will be part of the trial. We will have to watch this very carefully, obviously.
Yeah,
but can I ask you?
We don't know, and we don't know if it'll be for murder. We don't know what it'll be
Yes.
for. We've got a lot more to do on this case. And this is what we have to do in this moment. We have to keep pushing. It's a step, but it's not the final.
As her lawyer said, the family lawyer said. You know, there's the bigger picture, obviously. Breonna Taylor was a major victim, a major part, a major brick in this wall of the racial upheaval that is happening in the United States. Her death, you know, obviously, which is why we're talking about it, triggered so much protest and so much agony in your community. And of course, George Floyd's adding to the number of people who have been killed around the world as well. What do you think this ruling, this grand jury indictment today says about the greater hope in your community that racial justice will be dealt with properly in the United States, and this Black Lives Matter moment, which is a movement, will actually move ahead?
Well, let's again, I think, restate just a little bit. In the American community, all of our community, in this culture, in humanity, in this point in the world, remember, while we talk about George Floyd, it took George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, and by the way, it took a long time for Breonna Taylor to be lifted up. And then there are many others whose names aren't called. Then you had Tamir Rice. You've had shootings down. This is not something that has just happened, right? King was talking about police brutality in 1963. And police brutality and death by police brutality is one area of necropolitics, the politics of death that's impacting Black people and brown people. The deaths that come from healthcare, the deaths that come from denial of wages, and what we see even happening with coronavirus. So at some point, America's going to have to deal with the politics of death. And we're going to be honest about the politics of death. For instance, imagine all white officers knocking on the door and breaking through the door of a white family and shooting someone. You know, imagine what you haven't had that case. Imagine what would happen. And that's what people are saying. We recognize that there would be a very different set of justice, just like there's a very different way in terms of the way people responded to President Obama and people respond to Trump. Imagine if Obama had gone around saying to some of the things that he has said, Trump has said about protests. When we talk about racism, the systemic racism, it has many layers. It has many layers. And this is not just this moment. What you see in the streets is a combination of moments throughout history, a continuation, constantly happening. You know, whether somebody's shot in the back running at a drive-through in Atlanta, or lynched by knee, or a small kid shot by a cop, and then his sister not even being allowed to reach him into Tamir Rice. You go on and on and on and on. And then on top of that, all the other death that grows out of systemic racism and problems. So this is not just a moment for the Black community. This is a moment for America. And it's not just a moment. It's a moment in time that's built on top of all the time, all the time, that we constantly see this again and again and again. And people know in their heart, they know in their heart that if it was a Black cop had his knee on the top of a white man on camera, it would be very different. They know if it was a Black cop shooting a white man running away, it'd be very different. They know deep down inside of them, they know if it was all Black officers, no knock warrant, breaking through, killing unarmed a white woman and mother, very different, very different. We see it, we know it, we've seen it down through history. And so at some point, we're going to have to be truthful about this. And for this Attorney General to simply hide, if you will, behind Kentucky law. Go back in history and remember when Southern governors used to say the same thing. Well, we don't do that down here in Alabama. That's not how we do in Mississippi. That's not how we act in North Carolina, South Carolina. And we don't like these people coming down here telling us what to do. Well, if the people had not done that and had not raised up, we wouldn't have voting rights. We wouldn't have the end of the segregation. We wouldn't have had desegregation. We wouldn't have had an investigation around the death of Swanner, Cheney, and Goodman. So these are very serious matters, and we have to take them very seriously.
We do indeed, and we thank you for being with us tonight on this very serious day, very serious occasion. Thank you, Reverend Barber.